So thanks for joining me live on another Photoshop School. We're looking today at blend modes and what they can actually create within the world of Photoshop. These Photoshop Lives are all designed to be looking at workflow and then kind of a pimping of an image, as I say. So we're looking at one specific image from beginning to end and how it kind of all works together. So if you've caught the way that we edit in the past, I basically edit in a positive. So in other words, I'm putting a star rating onto images that I want to keep. Then we've deleted images and then we kind of do the best of the best. So in other words, we go through them again, trying to actually narrow them down and so on. If we're going to end up with images and they're going to have a star rating of anything above 3 stars, it really means that those are images that are in use, or they are going to be used possibly within the kind of the selection that I want to actually keep and things really. So when we're seeing things that are 3 stars, at least you know they are images that I've gone through close up and I've made a decision that they are my favorite photographs. If you see an image that has a 5 star, it means that it is the best of the best of the best, and we're going to be using that as probably for samples, for books or whatever it would be and things really. Okay, so we're looking at the kind of the pimping of images. Right, let's start off with the workflow in the usual way. So even though I've gone down here and I've kind of selected some of the images just by putting either 3 or 5 stars, just so we've got a difference in the images. What I want to choose now is the way that we work through these files from basically the raw going into the processed versions. So let's kind of just go to the top, because we've got a very, very distinct looking images. In other words, those against the white background, those against my custom background I've made. I'm going to first of all select these series of images and bring those into the raw environment first. Let's not forget, if I want to apply presets that I've created already, I can just right click on to any of the selected images and go into develop settings, and then basically I can add some settings that I've already kind of done with them in previous presets and so on with it. All right, so again, let's go into here. And the only way, remember, I can take them through into the likes of Photoshop or into the processing window is if they've had a file name change and they've also had their metadata added in, which is obviously my copyright and so on. Let's go in now and open these in RAW. So we're just going to go to File and Open in Camera Raw. There is going to be a point in time in Photoshop School we will not be referring to go into the likes of File and then actually clicking on to something. I would just try and encourage you to learn one shortcut per session. Use that time and time again, and then you'll be able to work from here. So first things first, what am I trying to do with images? I want to make a basic correction overall. That means Control A, and then basically that selects all of the photographs. At this point, we now need to make a decision on what is being applied. I usually go in and add in a contrast of 8, a black adjustment in a -8. That gives me a very specific contrast depth. Remember, in contrast, both the black adjustment and the contrast alone is adding a form of sharpening to the image because of contrast sharpening alone with it. Okay, so that is being applied to all of these images. However, you don't want to kind of go in and affect these one at a time. You want to make sure that you're using the likes of some presets that you might have kind of created. In my case, I want to go into Studio Classic 2020, or I might want to work in a different kind of color tone, but these are all presets that I've created for Mark Cleghorn Studio Space and things really. And obviously from there, that's where we'd work. Those would include a change of color. Those would change an increase in detail at times and things really. Again, all down to what is right for yourself and things really. Once I've basically made the adjustments overall, we then start to look at the adjustments in the sections of images. So for instance, if I was needing this image to be a horizontal photograph, the question would be, am I going to crop the image and the information, oh, wrong button. Am I going to crop the information out? Yes. Am I going to make all this correction to the image itself here? Or do I want to actually do that in Photoshop? Well, if I've got things like lights in the photograph, I definitely want to get rid of them. And basically, some of them will be the same. So in other words, I can just kind of select those 3 photographs, make the adjustments. So what I did there was shift click to select another image, or control clicked. Yes, I can do that on any of them. And then I'm already in the crop view. C is the shortcut. Obviously, if I'm showing the whole image, you can see I can recreate it, or I can go in and add a crop to all of those photographs together. Now, some of them might be not nearly near, sorry, they don't need as much cropping as others. So this is where I've applied the kind of the crop across some. But then I might need to actually go in and just adjust a little bit. So where I've got the wheels in the bottom for composition, I need those in, and then I would fix those in the likes of Photoshop and so on. So again, even though there is some little bits in here, I want to bring them in. Now the first image, I cropped off the bottom of the image because there was some of the background showing. This image, I can go in and basically just adjust the floor. So if I felt that it was going to be the same across more of the images ahead of me, I could go and reselect them and just adjust that actual crop bar across them all and things really. Okay, so again, go into it, choose the images that you want. As a rule of thumb, we want to just get rid of the screaming errors in the likes of RAW, so we don't have to kind of refix everything. There are times though we're not going to crop things out in the likes of Photoshop because we might need the actual definition of space in composition and so on within things really. Okay, so we work through it. When we kind of re-angle images, so in other words, you can see here what I've done is kind of come outside of the box, and I'm rotating it slightly to give me the correct horizontal. And by that now the leg has become vertical, but also the horizontal is there. If I want to set a specific horizontal line, I can press A, the shortcut, and then basically just draw a line either vertical or horizontal, and this will then actually go ahead and actually readjust. The same thing applies once we're into the crop tool. Go in and basically get rid of the rubbish. Where possible, we want to be photographing in exactly the way. So you can see where I've zoomed back on these images to show the set, in fact. But if it's the best of the best of the best image, you might need to actually do all this severe cropping, but we're throwing away so many pixels. If this is something that you're doing as standard, you really do need to actually kind of get to grips on your kind of composition element. So again, remember, as a rule, I've zoomed back here just to actually show the actual lighting in position, but if it is the best of the best, I've got to go in and collect it. So you're seeing me here just in each of the different sides. I don't need to be doing that. Okay, even with the crop bars showing, I can click away from the image and then drag click out to select around the image. I can still again apply it to another image by slightly adjusting just one of the edges, and that will actually apply it to the next image I've selected. If you need to do a subjective crop, so in other words, things like you've got light stands in or whatever it is, then basically they're there. There's times though I just showed you either the rotation or the alignment tool. So that's A, select and drag along the horizon line, and you can see what it does here. It basically will crop off the foot, which I don't want, of course. So this is the likes of the image that we would have to keep the actual problem until we're into Photoshop itself. However, we only want to do that where absolutely necessary. So again, any of the other images, like I'm doing here, just kind of selecting one of the other photographs to actually crop it and just go from there. So remember what we don't want to do is leave ourselves just pixels we're going to have to fix unless you need all that space. But fingers crossed, you're giving yourself the ability to just go in and basically get rid of unwanted image. So there is going to be a slight one-on-one adjustment, especially when we're in the kind of the creative selection zones. We're going to leave these kind of lights in on the sides and things really. But if you want to just get rid of stuff, get rid of it now fully, because otherwise it's going to be work later on. Okay, so across all the images, they're kind of doing their job. Some of these images would never actually be selected, in fact, because she's put a shadow in front of her face because of the positioning. These two images can be selected together. The image here is definitely got to be the likes of a vertical image in composition and its space and shape and so on. Again, once more, it depends if she's reached beyond the actual horizon line with the foot, then I can actually crop it off, and so on and so on. Okay, so you get the idea. Either drag, click, and drop it in, then actually change the actual positioning. If you can't crop off the foot, if you can't crop without cropping off the foot, then you don't crop it, and you just go through from here. So in the same way, like we were saying here, as far as the kind of the crop tool is concerned, there might almost be adjustments that you make into images. As a rule, I'm expecting as a photographer, you have kind of filled the frame to your composition style that you want. That doesn't mean fill in the frame tight, tight, tight. It means fill in the frame to what is your composition. There are times, like with dancers, we need to allow that little bit of space around ourselves and so on. But again, we need to kind of work with basically what we are trying to create. So cropping is okay in the likes of Bridge and Camera Raw if you are planning that at concept. If you find yourself continually cropping images for no reason at all, then you basically do need to actually re-educate the eye so that you're kind of limiting this. And once all of these images are done, if we were keeping them all in color, then at the top here, we basically want to select on the down arrow, which is going to allow us to save them into something else. So at this point in Saffron Dancer, I usually put them into a folder which says the Saffron Dancer as a girl's name and then JFR. You can see there's already a folder in there anyway called that. I'm just going to create a new one and Saffron, and we'll just call this JFR. If this was for a particular client, I would also add on the date. So this is 0203 at the start of the actual folder itself, selecting into that folder where I want to save, pressing select, and then really all I need to do is make sure that the rest of the settings are remaining the same. So I don't want to change the file name. I want it into a JPEG. I want to save it at maximum 10. Obviously maximum is 12, and I would just go in and type that in if I want. And then I want to make sure I'm working in the color space that I want for eventual print. I want to make sure that I want to put the resolution at 240 dots per inch. I work in 240 instead of 300. That's so we can have a maximum size in print, and most of the printing labs work at 240 as well, so I may as well put it there to begin with. Just going to press save, and depends on your machine. It's going to take anywhere from about a second an image to around about 3 to 4 seconds per image in the processing of the actual raw file to a JPEG or a TIFF and so on. One of the things with Bridge is actually leave this environment. I can just press done and basically leave it, and start to, it will continue to save the images into the folder, which we'll see in a minute. And it basically will start to adjust the thumbnails in front of us to kind of show us what is going on here and things really. Fingers crossed you guys can all hear and see me. I should have done that test at the beginning. Oops. But yeah, it's adjusting as we're going through. What we've got here now is basically the images are being adjusted from above. Depends on your machine. I'm just working on an off-the-shelf PC here with some extra RAM put in just to actually help it work and things. But from within here now, I can start to work through the different images. But let's just go into Saffron Dancer. There's that 0203 Saffron JFR that we created. We click into it, and there's all our photographs basically processed through. So as I was saying to you, depends on your machine, basically how fast it will work. Right, so we promise in this session that we're going to be working through an image, and we want to work on the likes of the blend modes today specifically. Okay, so just clicking back into the raw, so that 100 EOS 5D is the folder name. I kind of selected some 5 stars as we saw live today. So let's work on these images specifically. Okay, so I'm just going to select them, and we're going to go into open in camera raw. That is, remember, going into file and then open in camera raw, Control R. These are 2 totally different images, so they would need 2 totally different kind of effects. The first thing would be selecting both of the images and making sure that if we're applying a preset across the image, that it would be applied. You can see here it's adding a vignette around the image. If I didn't want the vignette around a particular shot, I just go back into B for basics, or selecting the top part here, the edit mode, and just go into the effects, double clicking on the vignette, and we'll take that out of the mix, as it were. Crop at this point, we want to actually rotate this around to make sure that the horizon of the floor is correct. Next image here, we just want to work on and just go into select it, going through. So this image might need a little bit of help because it looks quite dark. The first thing is clicking into the basic mode here, and then if we just increase the exposure, and then perhaps we increase the shadow just a little bit more, and then we're looking at the color balance. So as shot, it looks like it's being shot in a tungsten mode to give it the blue effect. Let's click onto flash mode a minute. Well, it was shot on flash mode, so there must be some blue gel in the light above. So if we want to correct the actual color tone, we can kind of go on to the black of the actual tutu itself, click onto there with the color picker tool, and then pretty much we're there straight away. If we need to increase the shadow information, if we need to click into crop to get rid of the flooring, readjusting the alignment, getting rid of the actual light from above, we're pretty much working now. They're pretty good. So we've got our 2 images. Let's open both of these into Photoshop. So remember, as a rule, we would have been clicking here and saving these images. We'll just click outside of the folders, and we'll select straight into there. And that'll just take, as I said, about a second per image. If I press done for 1 second, I come back into here, you can see those 2 images are here. So let's work on our JPEG files. So let's file and now open with, and we'll Photoshop 2020. At this stage, it had no benefit in working with opening the raw file into Photoshop, because it would still need to have had a basic save no matter what. Okay, so we're talking about blend modes, and let's talk with a light image first, yes? The first thing I would do is I want her to stay pretty much untextured. So I'm going to make a quick selection. So let's just click onto the image of the quick selection tool. And then up at the top here, we've got the select subject bar or button that is available. The Photoshop kind of ninja and everything else is going to do its job, and pretty much we're there. I just spotted that, and we need to add in a little bit in towards here. So let's just go into the magnetic lasso. We'll press the shift key, basically draw along the side of the leotard, and then click that in, and then basically we're there. There's also another little piece here at the top. Just making sure that nothing else is really invisible. It's not. And now at this point, all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer of just the girl by pressing Control J. And that has put just the selection of the girl into the foreground herself. Okay, so that didn't take us very long at all. What I want to do though now is actually look at adding a background in. So this is what I'm going to be dragging in from the right hand side, is this background H blur, as it were. All right, so I'm just going to drag this in to begin with. I'm going to drag it on top, move the bounding bar to fill the whole of the image itself. And as you can see already, basically how it's kind of solid on top of the actual background itself. So it's invisible. Remember, if we turn it off, we can basically, it hides the layer itself. If we want the girl to be on top, we grab her layer and we drag it on top, and then she is on top straight away. But at this stage, it looks like a cutout, and it needs to actually have a little bit more kind of reality. So it's too light, and it's too bright, and it's too strong as well with it. So the first thing we're going to look at is in the blend modes here. In the normal, basically it's going to do, wrong button, I want to select this background blur image here. So if I want to kind of keep it in a normal effect, then it's obviously speaks for itself in normal. And then at the top, we want to use the darken mode. So darken, the multiply, color burn, linear burn, and so on. They give you different contrast and a different way that they're going to interact within each other. If we wanted it to be dark but not as dark, this is where we want to actually start to look at the opacity and how it kind of changes itself in the background and so on. We're going to keep it at 100% for now. The next block down speaks for itself. It's in the lighten modes. And this is going to allow us to affect the lighten pixel elements. So just affect the very, very bright elements. And you can see already it creates a bit of a wash effect against the dark areas. So it's affecting the shadow more than it is the brights. Yes, that's really where it's showing us up. The next thing we're going to look at the contrast modes. So that's the overlay, the hard, soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pin light, and hard light. Hard mix, sorry. And as a rule, we're going to be using these top three sections here more than anything else. The ones to really get used to are going to be a multiply and screen are probably the ones that you're going to be using the most of. However, soft light is pretty much going to be one of the most dominant ones that you use, along with, if you like, a little bit more higher contrast with it, the harder light, or the overlay itself. Okay, so the overlay is a little bit more subtle, and it's good when we're trying to actually blend into the likes of the darker background onto a lighter background that it's shot with. So straight away, we're creating a different effect to the background, and you can play around with adjusting or using different types of background to give you different types of effect and things really. Okay, notice when I dragged it on, it instantly becomes a smart object. So everything that I do is adjustable. So even if I went into filter blur, Gaussian blur, to blur the background more, it's fully adjustable by just clicking onto the Gaussian blur again. I can go back in and actually adjust it more. Okay, so that's working with a background and a lighter subject where it was easy to select the subject out of it. If we click on to the quick selection tool again and we select the subject once more, it's going to struggle with certain parts of the body and the tutu, so you can see the leg is pretty much kind of gone, so we've got a problem here. However, let's just go in and duplicate it for the sake of it no matter what. And then we'll actually start to bring in another one of these backgrounds, yeah? So in this case, let's go in and use the vertical one. In fact, let's use the background 09. And we'll just push this across and make it bigger across the whole image. Because it's a background, we're not so much worried about how it basically gets pixelated, because it's pretty much going to be blurred anyway. So next thing, if we pop it on top of the image, you can see now how little of the photograph has basically been selected with what we did. So there's even certain things in here you might not want, like the part of the leg or the background or whatever it is. And remember, you can get rid of these things by clicking onto a layer mask, pressing B for brush, D for default, X to put black on top. And then if your opacity is set to 100%, you can go ahead and basically just paint all of these out no matter what. So they will become invisible from the selection. But really what we're doing here is looking at the blend modes, let's not forget. So in this case, we know the darken part is probably going to be our best friend because it's dark on dark. So this is really going to adjust things in a different way. You can see already how it's beginning to actually kind of tone down certain areas of the image. Whereas in the reverse mode, the lighten is really not going to be a good friend for us because it's really going to actually just look at the dark on dark. So it's either going to be dark on dark, in other words, the darkened section here, or it's going to be the overlay element that we're trying to actually use and things. And obviously because we've got a very highly patterned background anyway, it's going to be less subtle, more subtle compared to how we saw it in the last image, how it kind of works together. So as far as the this kind of image, I'm not really sure what having an overlay will really do for it, because obviously we've used it in a dramatic way, but perhaps it is to add a little bit of texture to the actual girl herself, in fact, that we're trying to change. So remember, we could just work here, so we add a little bit of kind of coloring overall, then we go in and we change the opacity to just the way that it actually works within the girl. And of course, if I want to just affect the girl, because we made this selection here, if I just basically click the control key hold and then click onto the thumbnail, then basically what we can see is that automatically a selection has been made around her. At this point, by selecting the top background layer, I can just click onto the smart object, the mask, and you can see already how it's created that mask for me. So if I just switch the mask on and off by clicking the Shift key, you can see if I want it to affect either the background or the girl itself. So I can turn this around. So by inverting the mask, Control I basically apply the texture to the background. By Control I again, and bringing it back to the black mask, I'm just applying the texture to the face to actually bring it all together. So from within here, what we've looked at is basically how we're looking at the likes of quick selections to see what it's like. It's really quite good if we pay attention, and you can see how great a job Photoshop has actually done with this image. And then all we're doing is actually applying the background, the texture effects, to create a different kind of look and feel. Thanks for joining me on a Photoshop Live. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. If you've got any questions, hang on, and I'll hang on for you as well.